everyone. Welcome to the Moviemantz Q&A. I'm your host, Scott Moviemantz. The film is Major Arcana, and it's about a recovering addict who returns home to rural Vermont to build a cabin and, in effect, rebuild his life. Let's take a look.
How are you making a living here?
I don't know. I'll figure something out.
No one's gonna hire you for anything. Nobody likes you.
People like me.
No, they don't. They know you. They don't like you.
You like me. You used to, anyway.
What are you doing up there?
I'm just trying to get things back on track here.
You come back all of a sudden and you haven't told me why you left or what you were doing? Stop pretending.
I'm not pretending anything.
Then what the hell happened to you?
And joining us right now to talk about the making of Major Arcana, want to welcome Josh Melrod. He is the writer and director of Major Arcana. Josh, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having us.
Also joining us is John TOKARSI, who is the star of the film and is a very accomplished carpenter, which we'll get into. Thank you so much, Ujon, for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
And also joining us is Tara Summers. Very excited. I've been a big fan of your work on the big screen and the small screen. Big fan of Boston Legal. Thank you so much for joining us. All right. Well, let's just get started with Josh. I mean, really, the script is the thing. So how did this come about? What was your inspiration to really get started writing this screenplay?
Sure. So I make my living as an editor, and you know that's what I do day by day. And you know, it's a career that I sort of fell into, and I won't go into that whole long story, but you know, you edit other people's movies and you see things that people do. It's a great film school. You see things that people do, and you're like, I wonder, you know, if I could do that better, you know? And so after a number of years, you know, I really wanted to make a film of my own. And so I was thinking, you know, one of the things that people do all the time is they get overly ambitious with their low budget indie films. And so I was like, I live in Vermont most of the year, and I'm gonna make a quiet, woodsy movie that can be set here in Vermont. And I've been really inspired by this documentary, Alone in the Wilderness, which is about this guy, Dick Proenneke, who built a cabin in Alaska in the 60s and filmed himself on 16 millimeter. And it was this great movie where he just is building, and he builds like the tools that he uses to make the cabin. And there's something that's so serene about watching it. But that's not a narrative, you know, story. And so I was driving through Vermont one day. I was on this long drive, and when you're in Vermont, you see that it's not how it appears on postcards. And there's a lot of rural poverty. There's a lot of substance abuse problems and things like that, and real issues. And sort of on the course of this journey, all of these things, this inspiration from this documentary that I'd seen, the surroundings, and then my own sort of history with substance abuse all sort of coalesced into this idea. And I thought, what if there was this guy who escapes into the woods to build a cabin because the rest of his life is just a total mess? And that was sort of the beginning. And by the end of this journey, I thought about, you know, the people in his life and how he would try to reconnect with them, and use the building of this cabin as sort of a metaphor for you know, putting his life back together.
Well, I have to say, Ujon, talk about a pivot. This making this movie was a pivot for you in some ways, but not in others, because you're acting, but you are using your skills as a carpenter. How did this come about for you? Tell me about your first conversation with Josh. You know, was this something that you just dove right into, or did you have any reservations about making a movie?
No, I've been working with Josh, and Josh and I have played hockey together, so we've known each other for a while, and he had a couple of projects on his own house that he wanted to have done. And so I was working at his house, and over a period of time, he would come out and talk with me and tell me what he was doing. And then at the point that it came up, it really I didn't hesitate for a second. It sounded like a really kind of a fun opportunity to do something that I was already familiar with. The carpentry part, you kind of not an issue, but to have an opportunity to go and act and be in front of a camera and have that experience seemed like just a really good time. So no, there was no hesitation whatsoever. And then, of course, being familiar and comfortable with Josh, I was like, I trusted him and to say this is what you needed to do. So I just followed the leader.
I can't emphasize enough how quickly he said yes. So I was inside and I was editing something, but I was also writing the script when he was doing this construction on my house, and it was one of those things where like gradually sort of I was like, what if I wanted a non-actor to play this role because I wanted it to be authentic and to actually see these things being built, and yeah, he sort of just wormed his way in a little bit. And I remember going outside one day and I sort of said, like, have you ever acted before? And he's like, no, really. And I said, like, have you ever like built a cabin? And he said, like, loads. I said,
that was not an embellishment.
Yeah. Would you want to act? And it was just like that. So yeah, that got us going.
Well, Tara, I got to say, this is different from so much of what you've done before. And I've seen a whole lot of what you've done before. Like what were your first impression, not just of the story, the screenplay, but just the way that this movie was going to be made?
Yeah, well, so when I read it, it was like nothing else I'd ever read. For a start, there's so little dialogue in the film. And so it reads more like you're reading a book but a very cinematic book, novel type thing. And so I was really intrigued by that. And then the characters, unlike, I normally play characters that have a lot of levity or slightly more in the corporate world. It's certainly not a sort of person like Sierra. And so that spoke to me immediately. And then I went and auditioned in some not grotty, sorry, Lois, a lovely little office in, can we cut that? In Midtown in the blazing heat in the middle of the summer. And I met Josh and thought, well, he wasn't very sort of effusive in the audition. And I thought, well, that's that. It went well, but whatever. And I didn't think anything more. And then when they rang to offer me the film, I mean, I was truly sort of flabbergasted. And by that time, I think the story had stuck with me and that character had. And so the sort of prospect of the low budget part didn't faze me whatsoever. And the idea of going to Vermont and being with a crew that small at the end of summer was paradise seeming. So off I went.
Wow.
The reason that I wasn't effusive was like, it's my first film as a writer-director. So there were things that I fixated on that first-time directors fixate on. And one of them was being genuine and being authentic. And Tara walked in and, right away had like an amazing resume and all these things, but she's English, and also very posh English, so she I was thinking we needed, somebody from Massachusetts, to play this part. And she did a great audition. And I remember she was like the only person, I had like a sheet of paper and she was like one of the only, I wrote great and like underlined it, but English, so it was just, it was something that I had to get over. And like all those sort of first time directory type things, it was, bullshit nonsense that should have no place in making a movie. And, obviously she did an amazing job.
I love the framework that is around the building of this cabin. And you're not just seeing like, as the scenes go on that, oh, he built a little more, like you're seeing it happen. Like you're watching this thing being built and this thing putting his heart and soul, blood, sweat, and tears, all of it into it, and I was riveted watching all that stuff. So what were the challenges to build a cabin on top of the challenges of making a movie? You got a challenge within a challenge. Josh, you go first on that.
I mean, it was the biggest challenge of production, was that not only were we making the movie, but we were, you know, as has been said to me many times, you would ordinarily build the cabin in reverse. You know, you would disassemble the cabin in order to most efficiently make the movie. But I wanted it to be a real cabin. That was important to me for, you know, reasons of believability, but also like sustainability and a lot of things. And so it was just this constant threat of everything falling apart. If the building of the cabin fell behind, then the movie would grind to a halt. So it was like we would shoot scenes, building scenes, and then we would run off and go to other locations and shoot other things. And we had two amazing carpenters, you know, two guys who would then assemble the cabin to get to the next stage of building so we could shoot scenes a day or two later, and show the progress. And, you know, if something had broken, if somebody had been injured, God forbid, you know, it would have just been like sort of catastrophic. And, you know, that's just not, I had thought that I had very cleverly written a very small, like sort of contained, simple story to make. And then when we sort of got into the thick of it and I realized how complicated building, especially this type of cabin, which is a post and beam cabin, you know, I realized that it was just incredibly daunting. And so literally up until the last few days, it was never clear that we were going to make it, just because, you know, anything could have gone wrong. And you know, everything was scheduled down to like the hour. So it would be like we would shoot a scene, and then the building team would have X number of hours to get to the next stage, you know, and so, you know, that was just, it was constant struggle.
Yeah, Ujon, what was that like for you to not only act really for the first time, but to have it framed around your building of this cabin? I mean, did sort of the carpentry aspect of your character give you confidence as an actor because you were sort of doing what you knew?
Yeah, I think so, for sure. You know, the building project as standing alone, I understood that from the beginning to the end. And in fact, there was a lot of pre-production stuff. I mean, we had meetings with the builders and hiring the lead carpenter and talking about the logistics of putting a building together, which, you know, I work on building projects all the time. So from that standpoint, I knew what to expect, and I knew how to go about it, how to organize and arrange, you know, different things in different layers. But then to add a whole nother piece of building, I mean, making a movie is like building a building. So it's like, you're literally building a building within a building. And there were so many moving parts. For me, after all the pre-production and everybody was in place, the lead carpenters and the frame was all cut out, we had sort of organized all that kind of stuff together. I got to watch that happen, and then I just got to fall into the acting part, and you know, being directed by Josh and following Tara's lead on a lot of the acting components. So, you know, the building part I felt confident with, but I could definitely see that it's a major struggle to organize logistics of a film crew around something that I'm very familiar with. So yeah, it was pretty incredible to see it take off and take shape and then come to fruition.
Tara, what was it like for you to see that all take shape, literally and figuratively?
It was awe-inspiring. It was amazing. The cabin is another character in the film, and the cabin was another. It was like, you know, when you work with children or animals, like you have to surrender to the fact that something might go wrong with them. And it's the same with this. It was that took priority over everything, and so we had to get the shot, and we had to shoot it in a certain amount of days, and there was no two ways about that. And I don't have that many scenes. I go and visit him once, and then at the very end, so I wasn't around too much for the building parts of it. But I watched it again the night before last, and I mean, it is utterly mesmerizing watching Ujon or watching Dink the details of the whole thing, and the balancing with the seesaw and it's just, I mean, that alone, take out the whole storyline, I could just watch you build for days. It's fascinating. So.
Well, and interestingly enough, that's sort of part of the success of the movie too. Is while I'm a builder, and I do that as a profession, you know, I did not build that cabin. I mean, I had a hand in being directed to do this piece, but the credit of the building goes to the builders who were doing it, and it's kind of an interesting way to take credit for the as it unfolded. People are like, oh, I love that cabin that you built. I know very well that I didn't really build that cabin. I just had a hand in putting it together. So that was interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I want to ask also, Tara, like going from so many of the bigger productions that you've worked on to doing the something as low budget and like you said, you know, not a whole lot of dialogue. What were sort of the conversations that you and Ujon had at the very beginning to sort of like flesh out, develop the relationship, you know, working with a seasoned professional actor and someone who's acting for the first time? What was that like?
We didn't have, so I think I got there like 3 days or 2, I can't quite remember, maybe a few days beforehand. And so I suggested that Ujon and I meet up and kind of go through the script, just scene by scene, just to sort of talk through some things, which he was, you know, very amenable to. And more than anything, like Ujon, more than most people I've ever worked with professionally, is so receptive and so up for playing and trying things out and has no ego about it. And so it made it just really, immediately we got on. And I mean, yeah, it was one of the most amazing on-camera, off-camera relationships I've ever had with somebody on a job. Speaking with Josh at the very beginning was very funny because I came up and we had this like lunch at the general store in the little town that we were at, and he was like, "So you're going to meet Ujon, and he's never acted before, and he is, you know, he's a cut." And I was like, right, okay. And then there's like, and there's no, you know, it's going to be slightly primitive, the set, and not too fussy, and like there was no hair and makeup, there was no mirror around. It was like you used a little pocket mirror to do touch up. They weren't touch ups. I touched up myself. All the things, all the lovely amenities and luxuries that you enjoy on a major movie set, we did not have. Like I was like, where do I go to use the bathroom? And they were like, just behind that tree.
Wow.
Yeah, but literally, quite literally. And so the whole thing was just, it was such a novel thing, but it just was what it was, and you just got on with it. And everybody was what was so charming about this film is everybody wanted to be there. No one was doing this for a big paycheck. So a lot of the crew had come up from New York and had devoted like many hours and working really, really hard for the love of the project. And so you felt that in every day that you went to work, people really wanted to be there, and that sort of sense of community is can really augment like a project.
Ujon, I want to flip over the other side of that conversation. You know, you're getting to meet a seasoned professional actor and collaborate. What were the things that you picked up immediately when you started making the movie as an actor? And what were some of the things that you picked up over time, you know, as an actor?
Yeah, so when I first started, you know, I had gotten the script, and Josh and Teo Jagar, one of the producers, and I got together, and we were running lines, and, you know, I worked really hard to try to get off book. And, you know, I was poring over the dialogue and really trying to know my parts. And I think that, you know, immediately upon meeting Tara, she brought this sense of like, I really felt a lot of confidence. There was somebody who had done this before, and it was a follow the leader sort of thing. So that sort of relieved me from like feeling like I had to memorize everything in that moment. And we would do lines. We would run lines together the day before. And so we did a lot of the work of setting up scenes, you know, the night before. It wasn't like I had to know and memorize it all. So working with somebody who kind of gave me the confidence to step into this and then just let something flow, it became a lot more natural when Tara showed up, because I was following the leader, so I didn't have to like think that I had to know everything. It became a very natural process.
And it was just shockingly apparent. I mean, like, I can't overstate how much Ujon got better, like the day after Tara arrived. It was like the first few days of shooting, we intentionally just had him dragging, cutting down trees and dragging things through the woods. It was all this alone in the woods type stuff. And like at most he had to like, grunt, when he lifted something heavy. And then the day before Tara arrived, I think was the first time that he actually had a scene with someone. And it went okay. It was a little bit stilted and a little bit awkward in the way that non-actors occasionally perform. But like we were fine. I wasn't like freaking out or anything, but I was like, okay, like we can edit this in such a way that will like make it work. And then Tara got there and they had a scene, and their first scene was like pretty good. And then I think you guys had like a day off or something and like went swimming or like, I don't know. They spent like a lot of time together. And the next thing I know, because I was like inundated with all the stuff, director stuff, like they come back and like are the best friends. Yeah. And then like suddenly Ujon was great, it was just like this weird chemistry that happened.
Well, I got to the point where I could relax, and I think that was we had lunch at the fan house, which is where Tara was staying, and then we went on a tour of Vermont. We went to various swimming holes and just spent the day together because one of her friends was in town. And I think that all of a sudden we kind of developed an authentic friendship and a connection, and I just relaxed, and I felt like I was with a friend. And it's very easy to hang out with your friends, and that's what and Josh already having been my friend, it's sort of the camaraderie sort of just started to develop from there.
Yeah, and it was like it was like, I remember that day, Ramsey Fendel, the DP, and just other people were like, he got really good, he's really good today. It was this weird thing, and he continued to sort of get better and better. And on the days when Tara and Ujon had scenes, it was just like, we didn't have to work, like there was no stress. It was just, we knew that, it was the degree of professionalism when Tara arrived just went up sort of exponentially, because all of a sudden the direction became easier and we could try different things. And, that became, it felt, I don't know, it was like the sort of family was complete at that point, and it felt really good.
All right, how does that make you feel hearing all that stuff?
I want to do it all over again. It's so nice. But I think also it gave me a degree of freedom as well, because sometimes you can turn up on a set. I remember my first ever film, and no one had explained to me what continuity was, and so I picked up stuff with my left hand, and then I picked it up with my right hand, and the lead actor called me out and sort of shamed me in front of the whole crew, and he was a major movie star. And it was the most, I remember it to this day, it was such a long time ago. And I have a bit of a PTSD with that. When I get on set with very, very seasoned people, you think, oh Christ, I don't want to be the one to mess this up. And I don't want to, and so, the key to good acting is relaxation. And they teach you that in any class and in any training. And everybody was very relaxed on this, because not to say that the stakes were low, but there was a certain amount of freedom in being the most experienced actor on the thing, that it was sort of mine, like, sort of that relaxed me.
Well, I'm curious, Josh, is the cabin still there?
Yeah, so the cabin was designed to, the cabin should be around for 100 years. Wow. It's not, so we built the cabin in this clearing that that I looked at all these clearings to try to find the perfect clearing, and it was built in this one clearing, and then for reasons that I won't get into, it had to be moved. And so the winter after it was built, it was put on skis basically, and a bulldozer dragged it along the snow to a farm about a half mile away from where it was built, and it now it houses these people that come up to learn about sustainable farming at this organic farm in Barnard, Vermont.
Wow, let's take a look at the making of this cabin that became a character in Major Arcana.
Scene 88, take 2, Mark. This was one of the most challenging things that I've ever worked on, but it was also one of the most rewarding. We made a cabin that'll last a very long time, probably more than most of our lives. But this film, we made something beautiful, and I can't wait to share it with the world.
Josh, you know, you talked about how this has been a therapeutic process for you based on your own experiences. What was that like for you to put so much of yourself into the film, and in a way where it's not exposition heavy with dialogue?
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, it's such a long process, you know, from conceiving of the idea to writing the script to raising the money to actually getting to production, you know, and then, you know, finishing the movie and finally seeing it, you know, released very soon. That it, you know, I've sort of lost touch of like who I, you know, where I was when I came up with the idea. But I know that like during production, that whole thing was just sort of magical to me. You know, that I mean, sort of that it was actually coming to fruition, and that all the pieces were coming into place. But it did feel very therapeutic, just that something that was deeply meaningful to me, you know, was being realized in this way. And, you know, and that's just, you know, that's when I watch the film now, it sort of took a long time, because at first when I would watch it, I had no perspective, but a little bit of time has passed, and I can remember back to when I had conceived of it, you know, to some degree, and it sort of boggles my mind a little bit that it turned out as it did, and I'm just very proud of it.
You should absolutely be proud. It's a terrific film. And Ujon, what was it like for you the first time you watched yourself in a movie?
A little surreal. Very surreal, I guess. But you know, at the same time, as like having gone through the whole process and, you know, gotten the internal look at what it's like to be on a set and what it takes from every crew member. I don't know. It's sort of like it's one of those processes that like you're a part of throughout. So when it did come out on the screen, yeah, while there was some sense of like, wow, that's pretty surreal to see yourself, it more or less like it was a constant reflection on the whole process that happened during the making of the film. So it sort of, I was able to, I wasn't looking at the film as though it was me, which that was the surreal part. It's like that's not me on that film on the screen, but it was a reminder of every moment and everything that happened during the making of the film as I'm watching it. So it was more like watching the process and what the result of that process was.
And Tara, like, what do you hope people take away from watching this film? Like, what do you hope the takeaway is?
Well, I hope they like it. I mean, it really is. It's such a beautiful story of redemption, and I hope the takeaway is that it's never too late for that. And you know, he sets about to come back, and he's going to build this cabin, and he builds it, and then he leaves it. You know, and you know, that sort of thing of like, it's never, if you go down that path and you realize you've gone the wrong way, it's, do you carry on going or do you turn back? And he does. And I was so moved watching it the night before last, because I had some distance from seeing it at a very, very rough stage. And this is the first time I've seen it since, that I was able to be very objective and look at it as a piece of cinema. And I think it's truly beautiful. So I hope I hope enough people get to see it, to bear witness to that. And I think it's a timeless story and the most beautiful setting with a phenomenally talented actor. So that's what I hope they.
All right. Well, yeah, Major Arcana won the Audience Award at the Vermont International Film Festival, and it won the jury prize at the Austin Film Festival. So, Josh, I'm just curious, like, what have been the reactions that you've had one-on-one with people at some of these screenings? What were the reactions that people had, and what stuck out to you from those reactions?
I mean, there's two things that we saw at virtually every screening. There's the audience is sort of split between wanting to talk about The Cabin and then wanting to talk about sort of like recovery and personal growth. So, and that became, and it was just sort of every screening, there would be people that really want to know like how The Cabin was built and if we actually did all of those things. And then a lot of other people that would say like either, I've been sober for a long time, or, my brother has struggled through this, or my mother was an alcoholic. And that's, both of those things are really great because I think that there's interesting things to talk about, in either of those camps.
There you go. Well, listen, Major Arcana is in virtual theaters on October 9th, and it will be on demand starting November 6th. Tara Summers, Ujon TOKARSI, Josh Melrod, thank you so much for joining me on the Moviemantz Q&A. And everybody, do check out this terrific, extraordinary, very, very deep and moving film. The film is Major Arcana. Thank you all so much.
Thanks,
Thank you.
guys.
Thank you.
Nice to see you guys.
Yeah, you too.